We are now going to invite a couple folks to the stage who are going to talk about putting the special together. They will also be available after the talk. I think as Chris mentioned, in our great hall. They'll step outside when we're done and we'll be signing prints as well as answering any questions. So if you miss an opportunity to ask something during the talk, you will have an opportunity after. But right now, please join me in welcoming to the stage Craig Schulz, producer and screenwriter who has worked on several adaptations of the Peanuts comic strip created by his father, Charles M. Schulz. Craig was the producer and writer of the Peanuts movie in 2015, The Snoopy Show, and several Snoopy Presents animated specials, including this one. Craig, come on up. So just for we're also going to have Neil Uliano, Emmy-nominated filmmaker who co-wrote and produced the Peanuts movie. He is also the executive producer and co-writer of 7 new Peanuts specials for Apple TV+, including Snoopy Presents, One of a Kind Marcy, Snoopy Presents, Lucy's School, and Welcome Home Franklin. He has also written screenplays for Warner Brothers Pictures, Sony Pictures Animation, and DreamWorks. So welcome, Neil. And Erik Wiese is an Emmy-nominated writer, director, and storyboard artist who works in both features and television animation. He previously worked as a storyboard artist and writer for SpongeBob, and his other TV work includes co-creating, directing, and executive producing 2 seasons of The Mighty Bee for Nickelodeon and Sonic Prime for Netflix. Give him a hand. And finally, our moderator, Chris Bracco, the EVP Creative Director of Charles M. Schulz Creative Associates. Bracco worked on the licensing side of the Peanuts business for 22 years as a graphic designer and creative director before taking on the EVP role. So please welcome Chris as well. And I'm going to turn it on over to Chris to get this going. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. See everybody enjoyed the show. I've seen it a couple times, and it was nice to actually see it with an audience. Yeah. So let me just ask, how did you feel, Craig, about seeing it with the audience?
Well, it takes on a totally different flavor when you see people laughing at certain parts. You kind of wonder, was this funny? Was it not funny? And parts are funny to me, funny to people. So it is a different feel.
Yeah. And Erik, how did it?
Same thing. In fact, there's like moments where there's sort of soft laughs, and to hear the reaction be a bigger laugh, that was a lot of fun. And yeah, just like all the kinds of reactions that you were sort of hearing behind you was really fun. Yeah.
No, I definitely felt the same. So basically, I know Craig, Neil, and Bryan, the other writer, have worked together for about 10 years at this point, if I'm mistaken. Can you tell me how that started a bit, Neil?
Yeah, I mean, I think our first coming together was Bryan and I at the time we sold our first script to DreamWorks, and we had like a 2-picture deal with Warner Brothers. We were doing a lot more feature screenwriting, and that's around the time when Craig decided he wanted to do the Peanuts movie, and brought kind of Bryan and I in, and that's when we really started to form our partnership and started to work on building that movie and starting from the ground up on the screenplay, of course, and then deciding to go with Blue Sky Studios and 20th Century Fox, and the journey that was to bring that into like a 3D animated film on a big major scale. That's really where we started, and then I think after that the opportunity came up with Apple, Wild Brain and Apple TV Plus to work on a series of new specials, which was really exciting. I think our mentality with trying to do these new Snoopy Presents specials was first and foremost always honor the comic strip and what Sparky created, but of course I think with these new ones, trying to really push the emotionality of the specials and really start focusing some of them on different characters that maybe weren't quite in the spotlight previously. So obviously we've done one that focused on Marcy and one that's focused on Franklin and so on and so forth. So it's been really fun to kind of really honor Sparky's work, but also kind of push it in new directions, I think.
And just to do a little more of the background too, I know Erik, you've worked on other Snoopy Presents specials as well. And that was head of story, I believe,
That's
right?
correct, yeah.
And now you're the director.
Yeah.
So can you explain head of story to everybody and then director and how they're different and
Sure,
how
yeah.
you worked in this one?
A director usually finds a head of story who, that's like sort of Captain Kirk and Spock. You gotta have your other guy who's gonna sort of challenge the director and look at other ways. So it's kind of like, you know, I hired a head of story, Carrie Momburquette, who was a bit of the opposite of me as well, and had all of the strengths that I don't. You know, so when, you know, Raymond and I knew each other back at Illumination. We were doing like Minions commercials and Minions shorts. And it was the kind that, even then, it's like he'd show me like his storyboards and go, what do you think? And I'd give opinion and vice versa. So we felt like, you know, we worked really well together. What he didn't know at that time when he wanted to bring me on was that also Wildbrain was trying to bring me on as well. And so it was like, surprise, surprise. I almost ended up on Clay Cadis's show as head of story. And it turns out that, I don't know, I should be giving too much of this information, but Raymond has the same doctor I do. He knew I was going to the doctor for a physical, so he showed up at the lobby before Clay could get to me to go, yeah, you're going to be my head of story. So I did that for a while. Yeah, and then finally, you know, after Sonic Prime, they were like, hey, we have an episode for you. Because that was actually one of the original deals, was to come in and direct on the first season. Okay. And there's some sort of switcheroo. So this one came up, and I got lucky with a musical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, to get to the musical part now, you know, Craig, what was the inspiration to do a summer camp story? Like we talked about, there's been a Marcy special, a Franklin special, Peppermint Patty theme. So.
Yeah, thematic. We set out to do a lot of kind of stories that already had impact and had a message to them, so that when you got done watching them, it wasn't a matter, let's just finish watching it and go get an ice cream cone. It's like, sit down with your children and say, you know, what did you learn from this special? And I'll tell you my camp experience in a second. Okay. But I think for this show, the one thing I never get tired of is hearing Charlie Brown sing. And for those of you who don't know, we have the singing Charlie Brown right here in the front row with us. I want you to give it out.
Stand up, stand up. Say hi to everybody. Really quickly, when he did, so we finished this in 2023, and when we had him audition and when he was singing for us, he was half the size that he is now.
Yeah, going back to camp, you know, they always say, kind of write what you know. Mm-hmm. Well, my camp experience was a lot like Sally's. And it's funny because Bryan, the other writer on the show, his experience was more like Charlie Brown's. The campus that I went to was called Cloverleaf Ranch, which is right over here. So my dad signed me and my brother for Cloverleaf Ranch. And back then, it seemed like it was at least 50 miles away from my home. And I knew that once I got there, I couldn't run away to go back. So I get there. I'm stuck in this loft upstairs with 30 other kids I don't know. You lay down on the floor, dirt's falling through the floor on the kids below and the thing below. So far, it's not been a great experience. And we go out in the wilderness, and we run into a yellow jacket nest. We get stung by yellow jackets. We have poison oak. We go home, and to top it all off, this is what really set me over the top from camp, is we're going to have the camp out at night. So we all get on horses, and now we go way back up in the woods. Now it's all houses, but back then it was like way in the middle of nowhere. We're sitting down to have the campfire, we're doing the marshmallows, and now it's time to put the sleeping bags out and go to bed. And our camp counselor was probably all of 16 or 17 years old for all I know. He sits down and he goes, okay, you kids, I want you to know, you see that light way in the distance? And we're going, yeah. He goes, last year, that guy came down, and when all the kids were asleep, he killed every one of them. I'm like, he goes, except for one kid. One kid went in the bushes. When he woke up, all his friends were dead. So I lay down with my brother tonight. I'm thinking, okay, what bush
So you
can
hated
I go
camp.
hide in? So I crawled into a bush with my sleeping bag. I balled up. My brother comes crawling in the middle of the night, and we both went over to the camp's counselor, and we shook up and say, was that a true story? So the next day I called my dad, had him pick me up. I went home. And my brother got to bring his best buddy back to camp for the next week. So
Did you ever do camp again?
So I never did camp again.
Yeah.
Neil, have you ever gone to camp?
Yeah, I think Bryan and I, our camp experience was a little more, we loved the adventure of going out into the woods, and it was kind of the opposite of that, I think so. The clashing of the two experiences certainly made for help with the writing of it, of course. And then, obviously, when we were talking about this early on, you kind of drudge up all the feelings of your childhood, and then we started talking about very, ideas too of, the idea of, Craig brought up places that once existed, and then now they're gone. And when they're gone forever. And I know Craig was telling us about, because he's a pilot, all these airports that used to be in LA, and now they're all gone. There was 25, now there's 5 or something. We started talking about that, then we started talking about legacy and passing things on to the next generation and making them better than, it was for us, and the idea of community coming together and, and saving these kind of places. And that's once you start having these conversations, though, that's where this thing really started to kind of get built, into the idea of what the story would be for this. And then it was sort of we had little, pieces and visions before it really started to form. It was okay, there'll be, Frida. Craig talked about the idea of Frida singing in the woods, just that image of Frida singing in the woods and Charlie Brown overhearing it. She didn't end up becoming part of the special, but that's just stuff like that. The idea of saving a camp, and we always had the vision of this Field of Dreams moment where all the people come to this, stuff like that. That's just how it started. Little pieces started being built, and then, after you start having those pieces, they start forming kind of a big, bigger story.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how all this kind of started to come to be.
Yeah, you have to appreciate that none of us, Erik included, had ever done a musical before. So we had done, I think, 7 Snoopy Presents specials, and I was always trying to look for something new that my dad hadn't done. It's hard to believe they did over 50 specials, and they had never really done a musical from the ground up. So I'd been watching a lot of musicals. In my mind, when I watched them, for some reason, I could always transfix the characters in these musicals, singing, dancing, whatever. So one day in a meeting, I just threw out, how about we do a musical? And everybody around the room and Wildman were thinking, well, can we do that? Would you let us do that? And I said, yeah, I think it'd be fun. And we asked Apple, and then I told Bryan and Neil, said, hey, how about doing a musical? And they go, well, we've never written a musical before. And I certainly hadn't.
Yeah, well, it's we haven't, but it's okay, we know we can, we'll make sure the story is as good as it can be, and that kind of thing. But it's really what this is going to hinge on is the songs have to be really good, because if they're not good, that's going to be a problem. And so you always have that worry of that's where we need. And of course, we were so fortunate. Ben Folds, who did a song for us on our. It's the Small Things Charlie Brown Earth Day special. He did a song for us. He was nominated for an Emmy for that song. So he was able to come back and do this. And with Alan and Michael and Jeff Morrow, our composer, he just had this kind of crack team of musicians, fortunately, that were able to.
How did you work the songs into the storyline? So with a dialogue and a script, right? Exactly where it's going to go. But
Right.
when you're bringing in
Right.
another person to write a part to take you from A to B.
Yeah.
Erik, what type of direction did you give to do that?
You keep them in the loop. You don't just sort of go, hey, here it is, go write a song. You are having a lot of conversations about this is the story and this is the emotion, and I know that I want to get some of the from the A side of a song to the B side of a song. We need it to tell a story. And with the first 2 songs, those are very classic Broadway songs. And what's happening in there is we would say, we need to tell a story here. He loves this place. She doesn't want to go. He's going to say all of the things that are so cool about it. And also part of what's so cool about it is the ritual of the road trip to get there. That is the sort of transformation into this magical, wonderful place. So you talk about some things that were sort of kind of, dialogue. I'd say, look up, there's a tree up ahead, we're going to crash. And he's like, we can use that, So there's that part of it. With Ben, it was different. I needed them to seem like they're talking to each other, the first 2 songs to the last 3. So it was really a lot of like, hey, these are my favorite Ben Folds songs. And also they're arranged in a way where it's a small band, and I don't want it to sound like a big orchestra because one is the Peanuts. I don't want it to sound like a Disney type of, it's not Frozen. It has its own personality. What you see with Charles Schulz is the hand-drawn, homemade quality. I wanted to keep that as much as possible. So talking to Ben, everybody's listening to each other's music. Ben really goes into some real poetry. And he's playing on so many different levels. And there's a lot of metaphor, there's a lot of symbolism, and he doesn't write lyrics that are right on the nose, that are telling you, when you're watching or listening to Into the Woods. And that was actually what blew up a lot of things for me, to go, I have license to be abstract, I have license to time travel with a lot of things, and license to also be much more poetic with the staging and the cinematography. And then bring it back to some of the classic Peanuts staging. Each time there's a build out to that. And that conversations happens with Ben and I. And so Ben is a night owl. I would get texts at 3 a.m., which means it was probably 5 a.m. in Nashville, where he's like, what about this? Like, I put this little part and that little lyric, and he would record his monitor. Why, I don't know. You could have just put it by a speaker. But I'm like watching the timeline of his music going, and it's great. And she would be like, my wife would be like, really, 3 a.m.? And it's like, yeah, I'm gonna go in the other room and like listen to it, and I'd come back weeping, like, oh my God, it's beautiful, And then, the next day we would talk again. I go, here's what you got to remember, like. For example, he says, we'll pack up till next year. It's like, it's not coming back next year, man. He's like, okay, we'll put a pause there. It's not coming back next year. So there are these little parts about story that we gotta, keep in there. So that working with them, don't keep them away. It's, being an animation fan, hardcore, and, watching the Little Mermaid documentaries, Alan Menken is involved in the story process. They will pitch the storyboards to him, and I will have beat boards. I'll go, this is what I'm imagining, this is what I'm imagining, and he'll look at it, and it inspires him, and I'll hear his music, it inspires me, and sometimes changes some story, like just before it or after it, and so that's part of that process, and in a way, I'll explain that, like, visual storytelling with SpongeBob as well, I learned that, it's a game. It's a visual game, and there's also some subtext that's happening in there. And when you get something like Ben Folds, it just becomes even bigger. That was magic. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. And would you ever give any sort of direction of this needs, like the opening, you want it to be upbeat, right? And same with the ending.
Right away.
The songs in the middle, how about that? Is that something that you sort of, do you give that creative freedom and then respond to it, or do you help, or do you have a vision that you want them to go down?
I have a vision that I want them to go. But here's the thing too. It's like they write the script, I go with it, and they ask me what's my vision, and I have to pitch to them the vision. And in addition to that, it's what is the music board and how do I imagine it, and then I'll also give some examples. There's Annie, there's Sound of Music, there's White Stripes, there's Ben Folds, and you sort of go through and like, for example, Sally's song. For the longest time, I called it Sally Furiosa. Yeah. I knew that it had to be her being furious, and I wanted it to be a boot stomper, and that's what I just kept saying. It is a boot stomper. Like, you could just really walk and be angry the whole time, and that was the tempo that I wanted.
Yeah.
And then same thing with, the opening song. Remember right now, what's it called? So Best Time Ever. I knew that it wanted a certain tempo, a certain bounce to that too. And then lastly, I think one of the things too that I also love about the Peanuts and its growth, including in Vince Guaraldi, is that when he goes into the organ part of his
career, yeah.
That's what I wanted towards the end.
Yeah,
to sort of
I
echo
noticed
the
that
same
actually.
thing.
When you start to hear the Fender Rhodes come in here
That's
on
it.
the left. I was just like, oh yeah, that really like,
Yeah.
I got the mirror to the Guaraldi part on that. But I was also going to say what's great is like a lot of these songs are piano based, which feels very Guaraldi-like also. So
That's
you know,
part of
those
the
things,
character of
it just-
these cartoons.
It fit well.
Yeah.
It fit well. And I guess I'm still a little bit confused and fascinated by the idea of the musical, because so like Neil, we have these songs. You have the story, you have the script, but like when you're writing the script and you're like, it's the opening scene, you know, it's Charlie Brown and Sally, and like, do you guys write any of that in advance or just this?
Well, in this case, for this one, we would write like a paragraph
Okay.
of what we think. So it really starts in like stages. So like early on, when you're writing the first drafts, you're like, which is very, again, different than what we normally do. We don't write musicals, so we don't normally do this, because this is very you're not supposed to do this in screenwriting, but you're writing like a paragraph of sort of where we would think a song could be, and where sort of like a song that could advance the story emotionally or character-wise, right? And so when we go through, we do that. And at first, we didn't quite know how many songs we were allowed to do, because all that has to do with money and budget too, right? How many songs will we get? I think at first
we wanted 8, right?
we wanted something. We wanted something. I think earlier on we even maybe started with maybe 3 or 4. We didn't know what we were going to have, so we start with like that, right? So we're going through our story and we're suggest, like, and there's clearly obvious moments for us that we think emotionally this would be great to have a song here. Now, of course, like what everyone must know is like when you're writing and making something like this, especially animation, everything is it's a living, breathing entity. It's always going to be changing as it goes. So as more drafts come in and as more people become involved in it, things start to change. So now we are bringing in our board artists, and where things are starting to move, and then we bring in the musicians, and then they have, with Erik's guidance and stuff, everyone has thoughts on. These are actually the songwriters. Hey, this is where we can do a song here. And then you find out how many songs you're actually going to get through the budget. I think when we found out we were going to have 5, and then that really dictates kind of where you're going to start placing them and stuff. So it really is, it's an ever-changing sort of thing in terms of the music goes. But for us, we're just sort of starting off with just here's a paragraph on what we think the song could be and what the song could be about. Obviously, we're not going to write the songs because we're terrible songwriters, but we know what thematically we would like them to be and emotionally what we want them to be, and that's where we start. And then then it kind of evolves from there.
Can I just tag that really quick with the
Yeah.
process? The other thing too is when you hand out certain sequences to storyboard artists, you're casting. And you know that somebody's really funny, someone's really emotional. And I think that like when you go onto set and you've hired a certain actor, they bring something to it, and there's discoveries that are made. And so you do a launch with your storyboard artists, and then they come back with something where there's a little thing here, a little thing there, and you're like, wow, that's cool. Like, let's do this thing. And that's the game part of it, the ever-changing sort of thing, and it informs you about something that you need to go back 2 sequences to set up, or it's going to pay off in a different way later on. And those are magic moments, but. Every movie I've ever been on and every TV show, it's like there's the script, there's the premise, and by the end of it, the collective creative part of it, you look back and you're like, that's cool that we created it into this thing from that spark.
Yeah, I don't know how much of this people in the audience know. I mean, these things take a long time, and it's been in process for how long did you say, Craig?
It took us a little bit over, almost 2 years.
Yeah.
Almost 2
It's
years to
been
do
sat
it.
in the can for 2 years, almost.
And we actually locked picture November 11th, 2023.
Okay.
That was a hard day, man. I was like, I'm saying goodbye to this world. Yeah.
So it's great to see it. Like once it comes out, it's almost like you're reliving it all over again, in the best way.
It's a good feeling, and also to be in this theater, to be here, to watch it with real, Peanuts fans, to say.
And that is really just to say that, because these get released on Apple TV Plus, and it's just, it's not like if we do the Peanuts movie, it came out in theaters around the world, and you can go and sneak into the theater in the back and like listen to people watch it. You can't with these.
Right.
So this is the first time I'm seeing it with an audience too. It's we're really thankful for you guys to come out and experience this with us. It really is, it's a joy for us.
Thanks, you guys.
And, Craig, I know you're a musical fan, but what is your favorite song or scene from this musical?
Oh, that's hard. Why did you do that to him?
I'm asking because mine changes. I've watched it a few times and it's changed, but yeah, I'm curious what yours.
Well, I'm always torn between Look Up, which he did a phenomenal job. Like I said, every time I hear his voice singing that, I'm just amazed. So I like that one. I like When We Were Light. And the reason I like When We Were Light, I mean, he did singing was fantastic, and I love the way they layered in the other kids' voices coming in the way that builds. All the songs build so beautifully. But the overlap in the visuals we put into that number about the kids, what I call the 1950s kids coming into that scene, I thought that was really going to blow the audiences away. And that was kind of Bryan's idea, was to bring those in. I had fear of that because every artist that I know typically does not like their earlier work. And I know my dad did not like the 1950s drawings of the characters. So when that was suggested, I thought that could be really cool, but on the other hand, he might not have wanted to do that. But I flashed back to the special we did on Marcy, where Marcy we had 4 kindergartner kids, and one was called Carlin, which was a cute little caddy. And when I saw those little kids, they were so cute and so lovable that I thought it's going to be wonderful to bring these kids in. And when they come off the school bus and you see the still pictures you guys did and with the tie-dye things, to me that just pushed the thing way, way over the top.
I mean, I think it's almost like not an Easter egg, but almost an Easter egg, right? Because like when the first time I saw it, I was like, this is great. It's like the 50s, like it's a throwback to the comic strip in a great way. And they do look like younger versions of themselves because sorry, I have a lot of thoughts going on right now. When in the consumer product side of thing, we go to the comic strip a lot. You know, that's where we draw a lot of inspiration from, and I think you guys do that as well in your process. So I feel like it was a great source for going back to a younger version of the characters instead of trying to imagine what a younger version of what they look like as kids already. You know, it becomes a little bit of a difficult situation.
Yeah, and that was the way to do it. I mean, I think Bryan and Neil had this vision of a tree being at camp forever, and these guys are always writing stuff where they want to put tree forts in them. And tree forts been in like any number of their specials. They love tree forts.
Guilty.
So the idea of this tree evolving, it started as the tree evolving. Then you start thinking, well, if the tree evolves, the kids also evolve with the tree. And now you see what Erik created was Charlie Brown, and you literally see him go from a young kid and evolve into who he is now in that special tree. You know, so again, it's a matter of layering in all these things. Then you layer in his voice and the other kids' voices, and now it just keeps getting better and better and better. And that's the magic of these things. You know, when you shoot, live action film, you go out, you take your shot, you bring the film home, and that's what you got to work with.
Right.
And it is what it is. Or in animation, it can keep changing day in and day out. Right up to the end, you can make these changes, and that's what makes it really wonderful, I think.
Yeah. Also, the meta part of that with like the younger Charlie Brown, what I also really like about that is that it's a commentary on the progress of an artist. You know, to see not so much that, showing Charlie Brown grow older, but to sort of show the progression of what the artist did to get there. And I really liked that meta part of it. And then the other meta part of it is just what Charlie Brown is wrestling with is the past, present, and future in that song. It's like, these memories that I have, and they're going to be lost. But Sally really loves this moment, and now we got to fight for the future. And it's all done in a poetic way that you need to think about it a little bit, and that's also what informed all of us about let's do that. It's honoring that past,
And I think, Craig, there's another Easter egg that sort of honors the past that you told me about that I thought was great. And if you'd share it with the crowd, I'm sure they'd appreciate it too.
Yeah, there's a couple in there that we enjoy putting them in. We put them in the Peanuts movie, put quite a few in. But in this movie, it started off, number one, renaming Clover Leaf Ranch into Clover Hill Ranch because we didn't want to get sued, number one. And then in the treasure chest, when they open the treasure chest and you see the first picture and the date is 1922, that was the year my dad was born, was 1922. So you put that in there. And the one thing I fought tooth and nail for was putting the Shetland pony in there called Lulu May. Because growing up, we had a Shetland pony, and it was named Lulu May. And our friends used to come up. She actually pulled a little buggy behind us. But you couldn't ride Lulu May. Lulu May, you get on that pony, and it would run, then it would stop and put its head down. And whoever was riding it would go flying over the head on the grass. And we put all our friends on Lulu May, and like no one could stay on this Shetland pony. They all fell off it. But more importantly, you know, I go back to my bad experience at Cloverleaf Ranch, and I know that a lot of kids get forced into these situations, whether it be school, ranch, camping, whatever. And the association with humans is a lot more difficult than the association with animals. So I thought the point of Sally really being disassociated with this camp, wanting to go home, and then she meets this horse, this pony, and all of a sudden she has a connection. And with that connection, it bridges her to the connection with the other kids. And that connection bridges her to the other kids. So it's just that one little step that wouldn't have been there had Lulu May not existed in that scene. Yeah. So I thought that was really special. I fought for that darn horse. So tooth and nail.
Wait, really quickly, there are quite a few Easter eggs. I mean, I pulled out the Peanuts album book, and there's all these characters in there that Schulz did, and they're peppered throughout. So for those with the eagle eye, you know, go through it. You'll find some deep cuts.
Well, it's great for those big scenes where you need a lot of characters, right? Yeah. I mean, they do exist in the comic strip. Some of them have names, some of them don't, and it's always a great source to go back to, you know. And I guess in general, like Neil, when you're working on any of the scripts or stories, like how important is it to reference the comic strip in the process?
Well, I think it's important. I mean, like we're adapting one of the greatest stories ever told, like with wonderful characters, and it is we treat it as an adaptation. So of course you're going to go to the source material, and you're constantly. I mean, honestly, the museum provides us with this wonderful database of all the strips that you can literally go in and type any little word, and that reference will bring you all the strips. It's very, very helpful for us in terms of, you know, with dealing with characters or anything. So yeah, it's very important. I think we always talk about, and anything we work on is going back to the comic strip always, and trying to, you know, pay homage to that. So we find it to be very important.
It is a wealth of material.
So much.
It's like 50 years of storylines that can be, you know, adapted or put together or, you know, inspiring. You know, it's always a good starting point, I find. But I do have the same question for both of you. I'm just gonna go. Erik, what is your favorite scene or song? Or
when Snoopy reaches for Charlie Brown.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't have an intention to do that, and then I got the song and went. And I drew all night. I didn't sleep. The sun came up, and it's like the second he gave me that song, I was like, "This is mine," and just drew all night. And when I got to that Snoopy scene, I was like, "Oh my God, I'm crying while I'm drawing."
I always love when you get, because it's fascinating, because Raymond always would do this to every director that we work with on these does this, where it's like, because you give off your scenes you're giving the scenes off, like you're saying, you're casting to the board artists, but there'll always be the ones where you go, no.
This is mine.
This one's mine. I'm not giving this to any board artists, and they always. And I love to hear those because everyone has one. It's funny to hear that.
It was done in one night, and it was follow it exactly. Sorry. And I also enjoyed that. I just blew out the screen. He's in darkness, and that informed me about the very beginning. So originally, Snoopy wasn't in darkness. You know, when he touches Charlie Brown, he finally illuminates. And he's a magical kind of quality, and they work together, you know, the same way that he and Sally work together. And, you know, when he goes into the portal of his depression. Snoopy helps him. He's just sort of the one last piece because everybody comes back. And it's this sort of magical power of, I'm not letting go. If I look up, it's over. And I'm going to hang on, and I'm going to will it to happen. But it really requires the rest of his puzzle piece to make him whole. And that last piece was Snoopy. And then that's when he can finally look up, and then he goes through the portal out of his depression into the sun, and we're completely illuminated. So that song changed so much. Like it informed so many visuals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Neil?
It's definitely when we were light. I messaged Ben when, like, after hearing that for the first time, it was like, I'm not even being biased to being working on this. That was one of the most beautiful songs just in general that I've ever heard. That just how he wrote that. It was very touching and moving. And so for me, that was my favorite. But I will say too, like, look up and how Erik designed that, because I mean, originally that was not even rain. Right. If you remember the earlier drafts, we always had, you know, the show is going to start and they wake up and there's this all-consuming deep white fog that takes over the whole place. You can barely see in front of you. It's almost like very ominous. And then everything kind of happens the same in terms of like where the rays of the sun come through and it starts to dissipate and everything. But when it was changed to rain and the way, Erik, you designed that sequence and how beautifully it's sung, it's my other favorite moment in it is just the blues and when the sun pierces through and just how that was designed. Those are my two favorites in the whole show.
Yeah, and you have to appreciate, if you see it again, look at the raindrops, because my dad loved drawing rain. For some reason, that was like one of his favorite things to do. When we look at the rain they drew in the thing.
We sure did. Those are lifted from the comics.
They are beautiful. Yeah.
Well, your dad drew them.
They looked exactly like it. I was like, wow.
Yeah. In fact, there are 4 variations of that rain that we lifted and put in there. Yeah.
You look at the rain comic strips and they're so difficult.
It's sort of like a weird anchor, and you just can't draw it. You have to just use it.
It's a lot, and
well, and you have to appreciate that, you know, he's drew with India ink and a nib pen. So if he was drawing line and that thing splattered at all, like Charlie Brown's handwriting, that whole comic strip had to been thrown away and start over again. You can't just erase that stuff, you know. But he was a master with that pen. That was the one thing, he had incredible talent with that pen.
Yeah, there may be some in the gallery that you should check out if possible, because they're works of art. And I think we're going to cut to some audience questions. So can I get that mic? Yeah. And before we do that though, I do want to ask Jade the same question about what his favorite song that he got to sing was.
Well, it's a pretty easy answer for me, to be honest. Look Up was my favorite song because it actually taught me something about singing with emotion. And before that, I was just singing, you know, but like the way it was written, and I was watching the Leica, which is like the animated drawing, and there's no animation, it's just like by hand. And I saw the draft and I kind of got the vision, and I was really like putting emotion into my singing, and I love that song. Yeah. I love it. Every time I hear it, like the music, the vocals, the way that Ben did everything, just a masterpiece in my opinion.
I also want to just say really quickly, watching Jade and Ben work together, I wish you guys could have been there because it was absolute magic.
Yeah, tell us about that. Magic. Tell us what it was like working with Ben.
Well, in the beginning, I used to come out of the studio sessions during my break and be like, Mom, they're not letting me sing. They're not letting me sing.
I was just going to say something about that, yeah.
And it's because Charlie Brown's not a singer. He's a kid, right? And I was a singer, but I was adding that vibrato, and I was really going over the top. When really, to be emotional with a song, you have to keep it simple. And that's what...
Yeah. It's again going to that thing of like being an actor also and going, this is Charlie Brown, and he wouldn't be able to sing as awesome as he can because oh my God, he can sing. And it would be that thing with Ben and I to go like, you know, part of the personality of Peanuts for the shows, the movies is, you know, you always got these child actors who weren't the best actors, you know, and that's so charming. And actually, in some times with the records, like I'd have to be like, you're too good an actor. You have to just sort of say it, you know, kind of not great. And that was something that we were going back and forth of like, it's too good.
I got that one a lot. I've got that one a lot.
One of these days, like, you know, when we all go to see you perform, you could just belt it out, you know?
Exactly. Sometimes when I'm home, I'll just be like singing it at my absolute most.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's not really how the song sounds, but you know, it still sounds good.
We want to hear it one day. So, yeah, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you. Yeah, but Ben did an amazing job. I had a lot of fun recording these songs. We had like a special connection, I think, because he was able to communicate the way that the songs, the way that he wanted them to sound perfectly.
Yeah.
And I just got that.
You know, it's interesting too, and we can go to the Q&A in a second, but like some of his directing wasn't a lot. There was times where he was like this and like copy me, but he would also say, imagine yourself being in this place and imagine, you know, sometimes this heart-wrenching moment, put yourself in that place and now sing those lyrics. That was cool.
Yeah.
I was singing with my
Yeah,
eyes
it was really
closed
cool.
almost the whole time.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
he
yeah.
was asking me to vision this, vision that, and that's what really made the songs connect. I think that's what really made the songs, you know, hit home for a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome work, man.
Yeah. So we're good. We'll take about 5 questions, and then we'll go out into the great hall.
Hi. I'm curious which comes first, the storyboard or the script?
Script.
Oh, really? I
yeah.
would have thought it was the other way around. Okay.
It depends
Glad
on
I
which
asked.
show. Depends on which show. Like SpongeBob.
Actually, it's a process. It actually starts with just like a beat sheet of the
Yeah.
general thing. Then we translate that into a treatment, which is kind of the general story. We can say take it to Apple and say, do you like this? Do you not like this? Then when they say yes, then we kind of move on into this script form. And then the script kind of goes to the storyboard artist. So there's just layer after layer, and everybody gets to kind of weigh in on what they think is good or bad.
They sure do.
But you know, really quickly, there are a lot of shows, SpongeBob, Dexter's Laboratory, a lot of the old Looney Tunes, where they will just get like a paragraph, you know, and it is that thing of like writing through storyboard. You know, there's that. I think I put a lot of visual gags in this one. I think it's because of some of that old school cartoonist in me, and then just respecting a lot of the script and a lot of the story, and just finding that place in the middle, and going back and forth, and yeah, now I'm wandering, but yeah.
Hello there. Thank you so much. This is just an amazing musical, and it's amazing to see the next generation of Penis Gang members join. And one of the questions they asked this week was, why is there never, you can't understand the adults? And I said, it's because it's always from the children's perspective.
Yeah.
And it was such an awe moment for them. How do you keep that perspective? Because there's such adult emotions and feelings, but it's always still from the children's perspective. That's what's the best part about Peanuts. How do you maintain that after all these years?
Well, that kind of is our Bible, really. We tend to take whatever we're doing, especially as far as animation, to kind of be locked in between, say, the late 1960s to 1980s. So you'll never see an iPhone or an iPad or anything modern with a comic strip, and people, through the years, people come in and they all have these ideas, and the first idea everybody comes up with is, wouldn't it be nice if Snoopy could speak? Because if Snoopy could speak, we could do all sorts of great things. And we're like,
You don't say.
Snoopy's never going to speak. And then the adults is another thing, when confused adults. And then they'll throw out the examples like, well, there's one comic strip where you can see the adult legs, or there's the one that Lee Mendelsohn did later on, which is the History of America, where you actually see the characters. But those are different things. And Neil, Bryan, and I have set our limits of where we're going to stay within, and we pass it on to Chris, so he knows that that is where we stay.
And even, to further that, sometimes your dad experimented,
yeah.
and he might do something in a strip once and then realize, I'm not going to do that again. And, I've watched an interview with him fairly recently where he was talking about the cat Farron, and he felt that Farron was making Snoopy act too much like a dog. So Farron then exited the comic strip after that. So, to Craig's point, we look to the comic strip as a whole and for the guidance. And sometimes when there's the little things that happen, just because it happened once, we don't always do it. It was a work that evolved, and we just try to respect what it was.
Yeah, there's a funny one he did years ago. He did a character called Charlotte Braun. Anybody remember Charlotte Braun? Raise their hands. Okay. Well, sorry, Charlotte Braun she would just speak in all caps, just loud, yelling, screaming character. She was in the strip for maybe a month, and some lady wrote her a letter how much she disliked Charlotte Braun. She took it out of the script. So my dad wrote her back a picture of Charlotte Braun with an axe through her head. Charlotte Braun is now terminated. And we never saw her again.
She may or may not be in a special hidden somewhere.
Yeah.
She's not.
Thank you all. As a grown 65-year-old man, I'd just love to say the musical part was fantastic. Is it going to be available on iTunes so that we can get that and download the music and listen to it in our car?
There right now.
All right, fantastic.
Yeah, iTunes, Spotify, the soundtrack is there, and it has the Ben Folds versions, Jade's versions, and it also has the soundtrack by Jeff Morrow, the musical score on there as well.
Beautiful score.
Fantastic.
He did such a great job.
Fantastic. And one quick question, I think Erik answered it. Who's doing all the animation?
It's the studio up in Wildbrain, and we were very fortunate to get a lot of ex-Disney animators. So that's why you have such fluid animation. Our lead animator was Disney, Don Bluth. He had been everywhere. And it's an interesting conversation because you do have a lot of moments where it is just beautiful, fluid animation. But the other part too is I was always kind of going, that doesn't make sense. There's points where I really wanted limited animation because it's such a personality of the old Melendez films, where it's like, hey, let's pop to pose. Like Lucy, when she has her rant, it was like, just take those in-betweens out. And he's like, but that's not what Disney would do. It's like, that's what they would do. And that's what these characters are asking you to do. And, best time ever, same thing. It's sometimes these limitations are good. You can't have full animation all the time. So we had a really good team. And going back to casting, it was that same thing of like knowing your animators and going, give that animator, because they're actors. They're actors. That's who they are. These animators are actors. And you go, I want that animator to do that scene because they're really funny. There's two animators that I knew could really do Snoopy. And you put somebody else in there who does really fluid other stuff that's like subtle for Charlie Brown, it doesn't come out right, and then who's a real emotional cartoonist, emotional animator, and it's like, give them that scene when he finds out and he talks to Lucy for the first time. That's who I want to do that scene. So and they're a really talented bunch up there in Canada and Vancouver. I just want to say Chris DeRoche is our lead animator. Yeah.
On the part when in the part when the person says that the camp is gonna get like stopped or whatever, I can't find the word, but when they say that it's gonna get like canceled.
Yeah.
Who said that? Because it's not a parents' camp. There's no parents supposed to be here.
Right.
There, so.
It is the camp counselor at the door, but it is meant to be a little, mercurial about that sort of thing, where you're not quite sure. It is the kids' rule, but because you go to this door and you hear the older person speaking, and what I thought was funny, I don't know if it was funny or not, but like that Marcy downloads that much information from just 4 or 5 words, you know, for expository dialogue. And that's how we find out. And also to make sure that that door is, you know, adult-sized door. It requires a little extra thought, but I think that's what makes some of these movies good. I'm patting myself on the back. Thank you.
This is the last question we have time for.
Thank you. This was an unexpected surprise today. My wife and I are connected with the Hill Country Camps this summer in the tragedy at Mystic, and it was
So sorry.
lovely. Thank you. Lovely to see this film and rediscover a little bit about the magic. The question is this: you've talked a lot about, for obvious reasons, the tension may be the wrong word, but how to honor Charles Schulz's work and life and how to continue it. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about where you do draw the lines, where you do say, and you talked a little about Snoopy will never talk, but how do you move the characters on into new generations while keeping his path both honored and satisfied, so that you never do something that he would not have done? How do you go through that, especially you, Craig?
No, I love that, and I appreciate that question. Back in the day, it was my dad. He had 1 secretary and 1 business manager. You know, now we have a staff of over 20 people. We brought Chris on board, and we process over 15,000 items a month come through our studio that we look at. Every shirt, every book, everything that ends up being in the Peanuts universe is looked at with our staff, and we approve the drawings or don't approve the drawings. And we don't approve a whole lot of stuff. You would be surprised with us. On top of that, we have a staff that looks at everything on the internet that is done illegally, and we try to get that stuff pulled down as soon as we can. So we're working on that all the time, and from an animation standpoint, my goal back when we did the Peanuts movie was based upon the fact that kids these days really don't read. When I grew up, most of the kids I knew learned how to read by reading comic strips, whether it be Peanuts, BC, or Blondie or whatever. That has sort of disappeared. So I had the thought of doing the Peanuts movie, and the family said we would never do a movie. That was kind of our goal after my dad died, that we weren't ever going to do a movie. And it came to the point that I thought, in order to get this next generation hooked, we need to create a movie so that the movie is going to be the rock that drops into the pond, and the ripple effect will be created by that movie. It's going to drive kids to read stuff. And the interesting thing I found about that is when we had the cast for the Peanuts movie with me in a room one day, I asked them all, I said, how many of you guys read the comic strip? And not one of them raised their hand. And after they acted for a couple months, whatever it was, they all would come in to me and say, I've been reading the story on Pepper and Patty. I really understand her now. She's this kid, and she's a tomboy, and you know, and they already got into reading it. So I think what we did, I think really worked, and I think carrying on the legacy of his with these shows we're doing for Snoopy Presents on Apple TV Plus, kind of does the same thing. So you know, we strive to uphold his legacy every day, and that's
we
that
talk
is
about
really
it all the time.
our only goal
Yeah,
is to preserve the legacy of what he created.
And there's, like I've said before, there's just a wealth of stuff that he created. These characters have a lot of depth. There's a lot to work with, so you don't really even need to create anything new. Like, they don't need to hold an iPhone. You can create a story or something that gets your point across without that device. Right. You know, you can still work within the parameters we set.
I just want to say something about something that you said to grab on. Peanuts is the only, I think, world and characters where you do have the license to go really deep. That you can actually go into some existential things that you can actually have a conversation about. And I think, you know, those comic strips, you know, it's in a newspaper, and these are adults who read it. But, you know, because they're so charming and they're kid-like, kids will gravitate. And also Snoopy is such a, like, gateway into that as well. But I've worked on a lot of cartoons, and doing drama is something that you don't get to do very often. And I feel like it's really this, when I talk about cartoon characters, you know, where you can actually do that. And that's just, amazing to do.
And I think the one thing you can take from being in the museum that I always found fascinating was that being a cartoonist, number one, you had to do a strip every single day, but it's probably the most disrespected form of art that ever gets out there in the public. If you go in the art gallery, you'll see what the comic strips look like when he originally drew them on the full-size panels. Now he takes those full-size panels, he ships them off to the syndicate. They get shrunk down to 1 inch by 1 inch. They get stuck in a newspaper.
Yeah.
The average person takes about 4 seconds to read a comic strip, and then the comic strip gets stuck in the bird cage, and that's where the art ends up. When you think of being an artist and what he created and how disrespected it is.
I never looked at it that way.
It's really unbelievable. But that's the world of cartooning.
That's very Charlie Brown, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank
So
you.
anyhow,
I laughed a lot more than I thought I would. I really enjoyed.
That's great.
thank you.
Great.
I'm glad to hear that.